That you kind of said to me before is, I'm curious, like, do you think people want to hear these stories? Do you think that people are ready for them?
I think it depends, I think there's many stories are scary because they challenge like a belief system, a common belief system. Like, it's like in a family when you're told the truth about something traumatic that happened that was hidden from you. And it's so difficult to accept that you'd rather pretend it didn't happen. I think that's just a smaller version of how I think audiences receive stories that are, that challenge popular belief systems. I don't think that a show like Reservation Dogs, for example, or, Acting Good, which is now on Crave, or North of 60, North of 60 doesn't really count because that was not an Indigenous show necessarily, but shows that are written and created and produced by Indigenous people, it doesn't mean that they're going to be uncomfortable, but inevitably there's going to be something that's going to challenge a popular belief system, and it's going to make people uncomfortable. And I think it's just the natural course of it, that we have to, I think, to repair our relationships, we have to be truthful, and we have to be open to the truth. And that, I think that's just where we're at as storytellers right now. We're still in that place of like, I need you to hear my truth. I need you to hear my story, because I can't even have a good time here unless you hear my story. Not just that, I think for even our own community members, it's traumatic, right? Like this current project that I have, Little Bird, was a very traumatic show to write and to make. And I think it will be very challenging for everybody to watch. But there's a point to it. And the point is that once we're able to address our collective trauma and the things that have happened in the relationship, we can heal. Like, we all have the potential to heal. And I think that storytellers are a big part of the healing process. And healing is very painful. So I think it is gonna be upsetting for a long time. Upsetting and uncomfortable, but truthfully, I mean, I spend so much time doing this work, and my kids come home with homework, and I'm just like, so you're doing history, and there's not one single thing about anything Indigenous in this history class. So you're doing French. They go to a French immersion school, so it's all French history, nothing Indigenous. So I'm always angry, and
that's like the role of the Indigenous
woman.
And I just
put it into my work. It's like we're just like trying to like change the narrative, change the system, change everything through, hopefully this pipeline into content that people are watching and that will ultimately have an impact on the rest of the system. But that's my what do you call that? Like not your meter, your barometer, your thermometer, whatever it's called. That's my metric, is my kids' homework.
Yeah.
If anything if anything matters, like that I'm doing or anyone else, it's probably not for their generation. It's probably, going to be for the next generation. But I do think that why I'm not worried about my kids is because they already have so much knowledge from their family around them. They're so knowledgeable about things that I never was knowledgeable about. I was just so ashamed of being Indigenous as a kid, like looking the way I did with all the, violence in my own family and being the only Native family in the whole neighborhood. And like being Jewish on top of that. It's like, I just pretended I was Chinese and fit in. So yeah. Did I even answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. I have a follow up. I was actually kind of surprised by this. We got this question in a radio interview that we were doing about the podcast, and the host asked us, how are you going to make people listen to this? Because you're kind of just like hitting them over the head with like trauma and the history of colonization. And I was kind of like, oh, I don't know. I just like kind of thought people would. And so I wanted to pass that question to you. Like, how do you get people to watch these things that are really pushing them to, assess their own stereotypes or, biases and like, how do you, and just having so much trauma in some of these stories, like, how do you get people to watch?
You know what I think, and I only learned this with my project Little Bird, because this is a story about, it does have a Jewish Holocaust storyline and an Indigenous storyline. I realized that the goal is to help people find themselves in the story, no matter who you are. Because everybody knows trauma. Everybody knows feeling invisible. Everyone knows feeling disconnected, and everyone knows what it feels like to be home and want to find home. Those stories are universal, and I finally realized that the job of the storyteller is to make everyone feel seen, even though that it might be a very culturally specific story. So then, you feel a part of it. You invite the audience in. It's not that you're hitting them over the head with it. They feel connected to it, which is the most miraculous thing about story. It is like, how do you watch a foreign film that you don't even speak the language and, even without subtitles, and suddenly feel the story? And that story gets inside you, and you like think about that story and how it impacted you and how your life is changed because of that story. I think that's the goal, is to help people find their own way into the story, even though it might be uncomfortable. But, and it's not for everyone. Mm-hmm. There are definitely demographics it won't work in, like it just won't fly.
Yeah. And I think you're just being a good filmmaker, having, writing a really interesting character that is going through a journey, something interesting that people want to watch, right? Yeah, and it's, again, it's not for everyone. You're never going to have, I don't think, a story that like everybody loves. Yeah. It's just for, for those specific people. And every community is different. And that's what excites me about like training and building capacity, is that, I've been lucky enough to travel through the work that I've done to like, I don't know, thousands of communities. And every community has a whole different way of, worldviews and language and storytelling and practices. And, even when everything has been taken from them, they still have, that identity of who they are today with that culture gone. There are communities that fully speak their language, but have no cultural teachings left and are, Pentecostal. That's a story. And there's a million stories there in that community. So it's not like, our job is not to tell one story, it's to tell all of the stories and to encourage everyone to tell those stories, because I really do think it's an enrichment exercise that, I kind of want to say like, you're welcome, because like it's good medicine for everyone. People might not know it, unfortunately, but it's good for the world. Mm-hmm. And it does build better communities to know about each other and to build a better future, that's a whole other thing, like that you were talking about language. Like language is the real thing that's going to unlock all of the knowledge that is missing, right? That's the truth of it. So we can only go so far, but the next real step is to do all of this in the language. Yeah.
And, like that's what we did with Unsettled. Was
I wanted to ask you about that. Yeah.
Yeah, it was the first TV series. It was the first TV series to go through the Indigenous language program, which only meant 20% of the content was Anishinaabe Mowin. But the whole episode, the whole series was dubbed in the language. And again, that was like pretty remarkable it was a crazy experience to do that. And my sister, who did learn the language, a good amount of the language, is in it, and she got to speak the language in it. And it was just like amazing. You know, I don't know when that will happen next for me, but yeah, that's the next big frontier for sure, is everything in the language.
I think it's so important to hear it too. Like in film, you can hear it, because like when being the Indigenous reporter, we started to translate a bunch of my articles into languages from the communities. But I found like when it's just written, like how many of you here could read Mohawk? You know, like that it doesn't bring it alive. Like you have to hear it. So I even talked about maybe having someone like reading it, so you could like click something and then hear it. So I think having it in film is so much more powerful, because even like being able to connect, like like our K's sound like G's, and we've got, you know, there's some things going on in there that, you know, people can't. It just kind of is like this barrier, and it stops people. And yeah, I think our languages are so beautiful, and they are like the answer.